Hi friends, starting with the 9 Jan editorial, there are many important editorials in today's newspaper. So starting with the first editorial, which is the slowing economy, this editorial speaks about the GVA and GDP data. See, for the PT point of view, the GVA, which is gross value added, and the GDP data is brought out by the Central Statistics Office. The other functions of Central Statistics Office is also important, and we'll see that in the economy video. Now, what is gross value added? Gross value added is a productivity metric that measures the contribution to an economy, the producer, sector, or region. Gross value added provides a dollar value of amount of goods and services that have been produced, less or subtracting the cost of all inputs and raw materials that are directly attributable to that production. So according to the data, there's decrease in the GDP growth, which is 7.1% compared with the 7.6% in 2015 and 2016, and GVA forecast is to expand at 7% this year, easing from 7.2%, which was 12 months earlier. So GDP and GVA are showing decrease, and as the chief statistician emphasized. These projections were based solely on the data from first 7 months through October and do not factor in the impact from the withdrawal of high-value bank notes and the consequent cash crunch. And this is to say that the effect of demonetization is not factored in this rate. And a closer look at the sectoral GVA projection throws relief into the areas of concern like the mining and quarrying, which is estimated to shrink 1.8% this year after expanding 7.4% earlier, while electricity, gas, water supply and other utility services collectively, which are an indicator of broader economic activity, is slowing to 6.5% from 6.6%. So there's not much difference, but the worrying area is the mining and quarrying. And more worryingly is the 7-month numbers establish that two key engines of the economy, which are the manufacturing and services, are losing momentum faster than that it was anticipated, and this could spell troubles for the coming quarters. So the reason for that being is the impact of demonetization and what the Reserve Bank of India refer to as the short-run disruptions in economic activity in the cash intensive sectors such as retail, trade, hotels and restaurants and transportation, and in the unorganized sector, and aggregate demand compression associated with the adverse wealth effects. But the silver lining is the expected increase in the growth in the agriculture sector due to normal monsoons. If the farmers countrywide can tide over the acute cash shortage resulting from the demonetization and ensure that the sowing translates to strong growth output, and we could see strong growth output, we could see rural consumption provide some cushioning from the slowdown. Now, coming to our next editorial, which is unclogging the cities. So, urban design in India is the preserve of the state governments and local bodies. So, this belongs to state list, which is important for PT. This editorial basically speaks about the move to make Delhi's iconic Connaught Place a pedestrian zone from February and keep out cars and other vehicles from the inner and the middle circle during a 3-month trial program, which is an inspiring attempt to reconquer the public spaces. And also, Urban Minister has suggested the inclusion of water fountains and other areas for relaxation in the inner areas of the CP. Now, taking the similar examples worldwide, the prominent examples are like the Times Square in New York and the route along the Seine in Paris and the curbs on cars in Central Avenue in Madrid. So, there is an apprehension that, contrary to the apprehensions that restrictions affect the commercial activity, the experience around the world has been quite the opposite. So, it shows that according to the world experience, it shows that the space for better walking and the number of food plazas and, emission-free public transport and encouraging the use of bicycles have resulted in improvement in the local economy. Now coming to the other suggestion which India can follow is that in the many intermediate phase, many cities find it rewarding to leave a stiff congestion charge on a personal vehicles entering the designated area. So this is a mature idea which India should trial and under its smart cities program, and it should be mandated by law that all proceeds would go towards funding the activities like we have seen, providing a better walking area, or encouraging the emission free public transport, or encouraging use of bicycles, etc. So to conclude, measures to unclog cities are often posed wrongly as detrimental to the economy and the efficiency. While cars will continue to remain relevant for the longer distance travel, dense urban areas need relief from the excessive motorization. Now, moving on to the next editorial, which is revisiting a passage from India. This editorial speaks about the Indian diaspora in various parts of the world. So, now taking this is very important for the both mains in mains like paper 2 and also for essay. Now, considering the migration, that we can divide into two types. One is pre-independence migration, another is post-independence. In post-independence, the migration to the West Asian countries and the migration to the Western countries. Now let's look at the pre-independence era migration. So in the pre-independence era, the Indians under the British rule, they usually migrated to the African countries and the Caribbean countries. So now dealing with the Indian diaspora there, India has largely a positive record of dealing with the diaspora that has left India as indentured labor in the 19th century, in the period from 1833 to 1917, particularly for the Caribbean, where the labor shortages ensued following the abolition of slavery. So and coincidentally, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, J.S. Kehar, hails from East Africa. Now, looking at the various case studies, now dealing with the Indians in Uganda. So, the expulsion of Indians from Uganda by Idi Amin in 1970s tested the Indian diplomacy and its ability to protect the diaspora. India passed the buck to Britain as the guarantor of their safety, as most of them held British documents. Now coming to the Mauritius, Indians constitute the largest group and 48.5% of the population are Hindus there. And if we have seen the community consolidate political power there with strategic support from the Indian governments located strategically in the Indian Ocean, this country has been an asset for India, safeguarding the southern maritime flank. But India was unable to support 49% of the Indo-Fijians in their desire for multi-ethnic government when in 1987, Lieutenant Colonel S. Rabuka overthrew the elected government. Their numbers have shrunk since then. Now coming to the Indians and the Indian diaspora in the Caribbean countries. So this is the same map. We use it just to indicate Caribbean here, and Guyana is somewhere here, which you can see it in this map. So, persons of Indian origin have headed governments in some Caribbean countries such as Guyana, Trinidad and Tobago, the two nations with huge Indo-Caribbean populations. Generally, Indian policy in the past has not been seen as meddling in the internal affairs, sensing that it may be counterproductive. Two vital links between the two countries, India and the countries, is the cricket and religion. But India has been unable to build on the base by boosting the investment and business links and better connectivity. That raises the question, which even China is beginning to pose now, that is, to what extent would India be willing to go to protect the diaspora when it runs into political turbulence in their countries of the abode? So one of the better ways to protect our diaspora in the other countries is to increase our investment, business link, and also the connectivity between our country and the other countries. Now, coming to the migration in the post-independence era, now let's take the first case of migration to the West Asia. So, taking Indians in the West Asia, for PT point of view, the very important points is the 6 countries in the Gulf Cooperation Council. They are the Saudi Arabia, Oman, UAE, Qatar, Bahrain, and also Kuwait. And these are the countries in the West Asia. Now, coming to the situation in West Asia, these West Asian countries were totally dependent on single commodity on the economy to improve or boost their economy. That is oil. They were totally dependent on the oil to boost their economy. Now, given the depletion of the oil resources, now they are looking into the diversification of their economic resources. Now, let's take the example of Dubai. So, countries like Dubai, which has almost depleted oil reserves, have remodeled themselves as entrepot for regional trade and destination for tourism and convenient living, besides emerging as a financial center. Both Abu Dhabi, which is also known as Dubai, and Qatar are modeling themselves as a center of culture and sports, civil aviation hubs, and more Spartan living. They also have poured earnings each year into sovereign funds to act as a cushion during the low oil price years. Now, coming to the two challenges faced by the West Asian countries, one is the shale oil revolution in USA, slower global growth, and also the environmental concern, which have already pushed the world into post OPEC phase and perennial low oil prices. And the other challenges, the challenges faced by the radical Islam, the entire region to the west of India up to the Mediterranean is now swept by Shia Sunni contestation, and the challenge posed by radical Islam. Thus, instability may persist for decades from now. Now, coming to impact on Indians, Indians in the GCC countries range from skilled and unskilled workers to those holding executive jobs or running businesses may face more challenging circumstances of the economic slowdown. One challenges like Arabization of the jobs or more jobs to local and threats from terror related events, and also Indian workers are facing competition from people from other countries like Philippines and also cheaper labor from Nepal, etc. In India, the union and state governments have failed to upgrade the skills of the Indian workers going to the West Asia, and few governments are also even guilty. And few governments are even guilty of allowing the Kerala lobby to drive GCC policy. Now, coming to the Indians in the Western countries, finally the issue of diaspora in the US, United Kingdom, and Canada. So, with the rising numbers and greater earnings, they are becoming more proactive to rally in support of Indian interest. The lobbying in the US with politicians worked famously to swing the Congress vote for US-Indian nuclear deal in 2006. While the US leads as a country with highest number of Indian origin persons, numbering around 4 million, the UK and Canada are next with 1.545 million and 1.2 million respectively. Now, coming to our one drawback is there is spreading of Hindutva message by RSS among the Indian diaspora, and also given events like by a PM like as seen in the Madison Square Garden show, in there during that event there was a blurring between the loyalties that Indian origin persons holding US nationality over to their adopted nation and their innate love for India. So they were like there was blurring of the lines. And so, the danger with this kind of public and Hindutva fed ritual is that it may create a majority community backlash and divide the diaspora. So, just a fact, comparing our Indian diaspora with the China, the Wall Street Journal estimates that there are 15.6 million persons born in India living abroad. This number has grown by 17.2% since 2010. The Chinese diaspora is 50 million strong, with 32 million settled in Southeast Asia. For China, this community became the bridge to integrate the economy to global supply chains once Deng Xiaoping opened the Chinese doors in the 1980s. They also funded the investment in Chinese economic zones. So, to conclude, undoubtedly the Indian diaspora's remittance in the past have been of vital assistance to Indian foreign exchange reserves. But the challenge now is to go to the next stage, that is of harnessing not just their financial but also their intellectual capital. Now, after the Indian diaspora, moving on to our next editorial, which is titled Time for Political Solution. This editorial speaks about the situation in the Sri Lanka. 2 years after Sri Lanka made an empathetic point by voting for change, which President Maithripala Sirisena and Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe personified at that time, the national unity government they brought to power seems trapped in the politicals of survival. Now, looking at the various issues faced by the Sri Lankan government is that economy of the Sri Lanka is far from healthy, and there is this And there is political differentiation within the government, and also the government showing soft peddling of cases linked to the Mahinda Rajapaksa, and also the case where government is silent on the regarding the hate speech by the Buddhist monks. So these are the government took no action on a monk who resorted to an unmistakable racist abuse and death threat to a Tamil officer in the eastern town of Batikola. The Buddhist clergy, which enjoys the considerable political clout in Sri Lanka, remains insulated, as that was in the Rajapaksa era from any legal action. So the government, being silent on regarding the Buddhist monks' cases is a matter of concern. Now, coming to the suggestions, the various steps to be taken by the government is that, despite the political fragility and insecurity of the current government, it has the opportunity to move significantly ahead on the promised constitutional reforms, because there is conducive climate for political solution now, because the Tamil National Alliance, which is also known as TNA, has opted for engagement with the government, and also in the pressure on the Sri Lankan government from the international community and human rights lobby and the questions of accountability and war crimes are significantly lessened in the last 2 years, and the TNA has also has also given more importance to the constitutional reform over the accountability, recognizing that the grave political risk in rising the later at this junction, that is there is a great risk in rising this accountability issue at this time. So now the Sri Lanka has now in Sri Lanka there's been more conducive environment to bring a political solution. But what is happening is that in Sri Lanka, the president is more focusing on keeping his party together, and prime minister is focusing on the development and trade agreements. But with the leader with his experience must know that without a political solution and a stable government backing it, even the grandest and most well-intentioned economic projects may fizzle out. So now coming to the constitution making process, even as 6 subcommittee reports on the draft constitution await discussion in the parliament, the government's priorities are clearly somewhere else. The later part of 2016 saw the constitution making process take a backseat, bringing the government's immediate political compulsions to the fore. There has been little public debate on the new constitution unless the government engages its majority Sinhalese constituency on the reforms. It may find it very hard to push the new constitution, resisting other political pressures. So now the government's more focus in bringing out or sorting out the differences in the party. So not much focus has been going into the constitution making process, but the government has to realize that the constitution making process is very important and take steps as soon as possible. And for lakhs of Tamils who are still struggling to rebuild their lives since the island's brutal war that ended 7 years ago, the wait has been long and very painful. As far as the two leaders are concerned, that is President and Prime Minister, it is much a question of political will as it is of ability. Now, it is now or probably never. So what is needed now is the political will from the government. Now moving into a last editorial, which is looking towards a greener future. First, this editorial speaks about the green bonds. Before going into what is green bonds, let's look into what is bond. Bond is a debt investment in which an investor loans money to an entity, typically corporate or governmental, which borrows the funds for a defined period of time at a variable or a fixed interest rate. Bonds are used by companies, municipalities, states, and sovereign governments to raise money and finance a variety of projects and activities. Owners of bonds are called debt holders or creditors or the issuers. Now, coming to what is green bonds which finance the environmentally friendly businesses and assets they've emerged as one of the key financing mechanisms driving the global economy's transition to a greener future. Now, looking at the background of green bonds, since the issuance of first green bond in 2007 by two multilateral development banks, which is World Bank and European Investment Bank, this is important for PTB as they might ask which are the two multilateral development banks which issued the green bonds. So, This is important. Now, after that, the green bond market has grown exponentially and is currently pegged at over $180 billion in cumulative issuance. So, penetrating markets across the developed and emerging economies, green bonds have seen extensive participation from the corporates and financial institutions, including sovereign and municipal bodies. A groundbreaking year for green bonds was 2015. Global markets witnessed currency green bonds and innovative structuring along the maiden green bond issuance in a number of countries. The green bond market was further strengthened with issuance doubling to $81 billion in 2016 from $42 billion in 2015. Supported by a market driven state policies and marked by a rapid growth in green bond issuance in India and China, the Asian market has emerged as a front runner in the green bond space. Now, considering the Indian scenario, India has issued various bonds, namely Green Infrastructure Bond to finance the infrastructure projects. And one more thing, I've used not 7 because this indicates the James Bond. So this I've actually used the symbol to to make it easier for me to retrieve information, because the more absurd or the more funnier it is, more I remember, and it becomes more easier for me to retrieve the information. And other bond issued by the India is the green masala bond with the IFC, that is, which is International Financial Corporation, and these are rupee denominated bonds. So was useful in raising an offshore rupee bond on London Exchange for investing in S Bank's green bond, demonstrating how innovations in emerging markets have the potential to capture the global attention. Other bonds issued are called the climate bond, where more than 50% of the amount received is invested in the renewable energy and remaining in the low carbon transport, low carbon buildings, etc. And also the bond called as a municipal bond, which let's look into it after some time. Now, the other corporates and the financial institutions are also issuing the bonds to attract the capital investment, foreign investments, and also to induce the momentum in the market. Now, looking at the commendable work by the Indian regulators have shown exemplary foresight in recognizing the green bonds as a key tool towards financing the nation's climate change targets and in guiding the development of the green bond market through the necessary policies and reforms. In Jan 2016, Securities and Exchange Board of India (SEBI) published its official green bond guidelines, in placing India amongst a select set of pioneering countries who have developed national level guidelines. And also, they have also brought out the requirements of the Indian issuers. And Reserve Bank of India has also passed regulatory reforms aimed at strengthening and expanding India's corporate bond market. The extent of partial credit enhancement provided by the banks has been increased to 50% from 20% of the bond issue size, while also permitting banks to issue masala bonds. This is a key, that bolsters or boosts the Indian green bond market. Now, coming to the expectations from 2007 and beyond, the full potential of India's green bond market remains untapped with only a limited number of issuers so far. With increasing interest from the government and the market regulators, 2007 is expected to see further developments in terms of innovations and supporting policy, and also regulatory frameworks aimed at bringing more clarity and impetus to the space. Now, coming to the suggestions, let's see what can SEBI do. Further to the interpretation indicated in the SEBI's green bond guidelines and what classifies a green, there is a need, for developing a formal definition of green to ensure understanding across the sectors, and a more descriptive and exhaustive classification from Indian regulators and policymakers in the coming years would be crucial in expanding the green bond market. So it is very much essential to have a very comprehensive definition of what is green bonds. Now, coming to the blue bond, which is also important for PT, following global trends, the upcoming year is poised to witness the first blue bond issuance in India. Globally, blue bond issuances have crossed $10 billion, but India is yet to enter the market. Given the rising finance gap in India's water sector, it is imperative for water infrastructure augmentation as well. Now, again, coming to the case of green bonds, we We should look into the securitization area, which has lot of scope. The rooftop solar, energy efficiency, rural water have been unattractive to the institutional investor due to their small scale and vast geographical spread. So, the aggregation and securitization of such projects could be a welcome move in providing mainstream debt to a small scale green projects. Now, coming to municipal bond market, the recent drive by the Prime Minister to resuscitate or revive the municipal bond market for water supply projects in cities such as Pune and Hyderabad is highly commendable. The Indian government's ambitious push for smart cities has opened up emerging points that may be suitable for private sector participation and may soon culminate into India's first green muni bond. So there might be a chances in the line of municipal bond, there might be a chance of bringing out first green muni bond. So, to conclude, with the developed countries reaffirming their $100 billion mobilization goal per year by 2020 to support climate action in emerging nations, utilization of green bonds as an effective vehicle to tap into climate funds is anticipated to grow. Collective participation of regulators, policymakers, corporate, and financial institutions is going to be crucial in pushing the frontiers of green bonds further, unleashing new opportunities in addressing the climate change. So that's it for today. If you found this video useful, please like and subscribe to my channels. And also in my last videos, I've seen few dislikes. Please, if you have any complaints or any problems, please reply to me in the comment section. Waiting for your feedback, and thanks for watching my video.